everybody out in Macabre Daily world. You all know me. My name is Brian Finnerty, and we're actually coming at you today with our first interview in a new recurring column at Macabre Daily, which we're calling Scared Sane, where we're looking at the intersection of horror and the mental health world. And I am super excited to have our first interview in this category with a really fantastic person who I was just recently introduced to, named Mary Wild. Good morning, Mary.
Hi, Brian. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was introduced to you recently by filmmaker Emily Bennett, and when the two of you, you're pretty good friends, right?
Yes, yes. I was lucky enough to meet her when I discovered her film Alone with You, and I just think of I think the world of Emily. So yeah, I'm super honored to call her my friend.
Mhm. And like having seen her movie Bloodshine, it's not a surprise to find out that she was very good friends with a Freudian psychoanalyst, which I think is a Macabre Daily first to say that we're talking to a psychoanalyst. Usually we're talking with directors and writers and actors. Um, but when Emily told me about you, she was tell me a little bit about your background, that you're a Freudian psychoanalyst, that you are a lecturer at the Freud Museum of London. Um, you've been a big contributor to the Evolution of Horror podcast, and you have your own Patreon where you delve into all things horror and psychoanalysis. And then, of course, you've also just published your first book, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's basically a compendium of scripts that I wrote for the Evolution of Horror podcast in a recurring segment called Wild About Horror. And yeah, I just found myself with loads of scripts, podcast scripts, and
Uh,
um, I put them together as a collection in the book.
nice. And the book is called Psychoanalyzing Horror Cinema from Routledge Press, right?
Mhm. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So first off, congratulations on publishing your first book. That's amazing.
Thank you very much. To be honest, it all was very sort of accidental, me entering the literary world, as I was always only ever a lecturer and a podcaster. So it's very much in the kind of like talking media. Um, but because the segments that Mike Munster, the host of Evolution of Horror, the ones that he commissioned me to produce, required scripting and narrating as opposed to sort of traditional freewheeling speaking on a podcast. I just happened to have all this kind of written material on my hands, and it is a very interesting transition moving from strictly only ever podcasting and lecturing and entering into the world of publishing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to hear all about your book and I want to get into that. But because you are like a kind of a very unique guest for Macabre Daily, I was wondering if we could talk a little bit just about maybe just your professional background. Because number one, I'm just super curious. I also think a lot of people listening to this, um, that's just not necessarily the world that they're used to hearing about. I could imagine people listening and hearing like a Freudian psychoanalyst, a lecturer at the Freud Museum in London, like that sounds way too fancy for what we usually do at Macabre Daily. Um, what so,
Sure.
for anybody who's maybe not familiar, like how would you kind of describe your professional identity?
Sure. So, well, first of all, thank you for the kind compliments. I don't think I'm very fancy at all, but I certainly will welcome any perception relating to that.
You,
Um,
you look really fancy on paper, at least.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Essentially, what had happened is that I did start out sort of academically. I got my degree in psychology in Montreal, where I'm from. And I was always sort of left a little, I don't know, wanting, I guess, in terms of I never really saw a representation of psychoanalysis, which is what I was really drawn to.
Mm.
Um, and I had a great professor at Concordia University where I studied called Dr. Patricia Chang. She herself was a psychoanalyst and the only one really in that field in the department, and or the sort of subcategory, I guess. And she formally taught me about psychoanalysis, and I instantly felt drawn to those concepts. I felt that they were, in a way, already capturing my internal language that I had no formal awareness of.
Mm.
And it made sense. You know, that worldview made sense to me. So I decided that I wanted to pursue psychoanalysis in my higher learning, and I came to England to study with Danny Nobis, who's a Lacanian psychoanalyst, and I proceeded to apply psychoanalysis to cinema. So basically, I should add that I'm not a trained clinical psychoanalyst, so I don't see patients or clients. I'm always sort of applying psychoanalysis to the field of the arts, more than anything, cinema. Sometimes I do look at other things as well, like cultural issues, but it's mostly cinema. And so, yeah, I basically just wanted to do this because also there was a pivotal moment when I was at university. I attended this event where I saw a psychoanalyst essentially shining a light, like a theoretical light,
Mm.
on a film called The Sun's Room from 2001. It's an Italian movie.
Okay.
Um, and I had never seen that before. I'd never seen someone like a mental health professional essentially analyzing a movie. And I loved the pairing of the two disciplines because I myself love movies. And I was very passionate about this new discipline I was learning about, psychoanalysis. So when I saw the two intersect so harmoniously in this presenter's event, I had sort of an aha moment and I thought, I would love to do this job. That would be so fun. So essentially, I just proceeded to invent the job for myself. I went on to graduate from, Brunel University in London with a master's. It's actually an MPhil, a master's in philosophy,
Okay.
on, excuse me, focusing on psychoanalysis and cinema. And then I worked a little while in the film industry, but to be honest with you, I had a lot of job dissatisfaction at that time. And it was through a lot of suffering, really, that I decided to make meaningful work on my own terms. So I essentially approached the Freud Museum in London and I said, you guys run these public events and you've got some fantastic public lectures, and I was wondering if you would be interested in focusing specifically on film and psychoanalysis, just like a designated recurring lecture series.
Wow.
And this was back in 2012, and basically we've been going ever since. So it's just like a regular series, and it's called Projections, obviously borrowing the term from both psychoanalysis and cinema. And it's gathered a really great community of people. And the themes that I focus on, I would say a third of my classes that I teach are horror related, but it's not all. It's not always horror. It's can sometimes be like auteur studies or a particular concept in psychoanalysis that is very beautifully illustrated in many different films, like the Oedipus complex, for example, or the Death Drive, you know?
Yep.
So yeah, that's basically what happened. I just was wanting to work more autonomously and do work that was more aligned with my beliefs and values. And I was lucky that the Freud Museum took a chance on me. And that's really how Mike Munzer discovered me too, through my lecture series. And he invited me to come on as a regular contributor on Evolution of Horror podcast.
Wow. That is a fascinating story. And I'm like, so I mean, I think a lot of us, I can relate to this. A lot of our listeners can probably relate to that idea of, especially our love of horror and cinema. Like that stuff doesn't exist, right? You can't just, excuse me, you can't just graduate from school and start applying to jobs about, I want to be an analyst of horror media. As you
Yeah.
said, you have to go out and you have to like create this,
Mhm.
which is, I think, whether you're interviewing somebody like myself or writing books like yourself or even just super active on like social media in the horror world, like these are all people who I think just realized they like needed something else in their life that didn't exist, and they went out, like we went out and found it. And it's
Mhm.
really, really inspiring to hear the story of somebody like you who like didn't just create something, but I know it didn't happen quite this literally, but you're almost describing that you just walked up to the door of the Freudian Museum of London one day and just knocked on the door and were like, "Hey, can I come in and talk?"
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Basically, I saw, you know, I sort of, like that old saying, be the change you want to see. It's a little maybe, cliche, but it is true. I felt like there was a bit of a lack in terms of, um, shining the theoretical lens on film and culture and the arts. And I wanted to contribute in that regard.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, and you've really found a cool space to be able to, as you said, talk about like really delve into the analysis of horror. Part of why I was drawn to talking to you is that in my day job, am a licensed professional counselor. So in the States, that's a type of mental health professional. And I found myself with my clients constantly wanting to recommend horror movies to them. And occasionally that's appropriate, but occasionally not so much. That might be making it more about myself than them.
Mhm.
So similar to you, I was like, okay, where do I find this space where I can talk about the two things? And yeah, then so that brings me here talking to you.
Amazing.
Um, so shifting a little bit specifically into the horror world, um, I guess I would be curious. You talked about seeing a lecturer talk about that Italian film, but when did you first start really realizing that you could connect psychoanalysis with the horror world?
Sure. So, basically, ever since I was a little girl, I was just, I guess, very naturally drawn to scary movies, scary TV shows. I love the Twilight Zone, like the 80s, series.
Yeah,
Um, and I noticed that other kids my age, we're talking about like, it started really around the age of 7, and I noticed that other kids my age were scared, some of them of horror stuff. And, and that's totally normal. I mean, not a lot of 7-year-olds want to watch Twin Peaks and, you know, the Twilight Zone and scary movies.
there's a lot of adults that still don't want to watch that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's completely normal. I think I was just an anomaly in a way because I just had this natural ability to tolerate scary stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and was just drawn to dark fairy tales and stories from a very young age. But also, I think my superpower that enabled me to engage meaningfully with horror from a very young age was knowing as a child that movies are only make-believe. So just being, you know, aware of that it's just a movie, it's not real, they're just pretending, no one's getting hurt. And I'm separate from that, I'm separate from the scary thing that's being shown.
Mhm.
that already opened up so many possibilities for me. And I had just had a very high threshold of fear. Not to say that I wasn't scared of anything. I sure was,
Yeah.
but I just was more open to receiving. And it was just that like little sweet spot, I guess, of being just the right amount of scared so that I wasn't avoiding them, you know? And so as a kid, we're talking like 80s here, um, I would go to my local video store and I would just stare for what seemed like hours in total, um, at the horror section.
Oh, those beautiful VHS boxes that I still miss.
Exactly, yeah. All those wonderful VHS covers and their artwork and some pretty extraordinary, B-movie stuff. Like whoever was curating that horror, that video store was a horror head for sure. There was a big section for me to peruse all the time, and
Can
I
I,
wasn't
can I,
allowed.
oh,
Mhm.
I'm so sorry. Finish your thought.
No, no, it's okay. I was just going to say, I wasn't allowed to rent anything myself. I was way too young. Um, and the guy at the video store working there, like, he always thought it was very strange. I would just be standing there for hours and he wouldn't let me rent anything. But sometimes he would play horror movies inside the store and I would literally just sit on the carpeted floor and watch these little TV monitors playing old horror movies, and I loved it. Eventually, I convinced my mom to rent totally age inappropriate horror films by tricking her into thinking that, they were appropriate for children because it was like about a doll or something, like the child's play. Um, so, and my poor brother and sister, they were younger than me and they were terrorized. They were so scared and they didn't like that at all. To this day, they really don't like horror. So that's sort of like in a way, my background. I got into horror really young, and I just I love all the subgenres. I have time for lots of art films and lots of like trashy films. I don't discriminate. I'll watch anything and everything, and I love it.
Oh, bless that video store employee. I think we all have somebody like that in our background who just like whether it was a relative or a cousin or some random employee was just like they either just didn't ask if it was appropriate or they knew it wasn't and they did it anyway. And thank God for them. They're amazing people.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they really blessed me.
Do you, not to put you on the spot, it's okay if you don't have an answer, but what
Mm.
talking about the VHS boxes just makes me want to ask,
Mhm.
like, do you have any images or a particular VHS box that like really sticks out in your memory? I feel like a lot of us have almost
Yeah.
related to the mental health of it, these core, almost Jungian images just that were seared into our brain from the horror section of the movie store.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many. The two that really stood out, that I constantly looked at obsessively and memorized the whole design, tattooed on my brain sort of thing, was um, Hellraiser,
Oh yes.
because they had this super vintage and cool image of Pinhead on the cover. And in my child's mind, seeing something like that was so intriguing. Like I was like, his head is hurting, but he doesn't look like he's in pain, He has pins in his head. Like, what's wrong with that man, Like I really loved it. And it really intrigued me. So I loved Hellraiser. But the one that really stuck in my mind and I was so curious about and I just wanted to watch it so bad, but no one would let me, was this old movie. It's a slasher film called Pieces.
Oh
And
yes.
know what I'm talking about?
Love that movie.
Love that movie. And the cover was what really interested me because it was clearly like a woman who had been sort of cobbled together, like so different body parts of different victims
Hmm.
sewn together to make this new woman. And this was what the serial killer was doing. And you could see the sewing, marks on her arms and legs and stuff. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. Like she's she's like a new woman, but she's got all these different parts from other women. And but is she still herself, or is she all of these other women? Like I was asking myself these questions, like who is she, kind of thing. And it didn't scare me one bit. I just wanted to know how this composite woman came to be.
Mhm.
Um, so those were the two.
Oh, definitely. Oh, yeah. And I love the idea that we as kids were sitting looking at these images and you didn't even necessarily know what the movie was about. You might be totally wrong, but you just constructed this whole universe and narrative and meaning behind the pictures. And, I'm an old man, shaking my fist at clouds now, but I'm like, just like kids don't get that anymore. And it's so unfair.
I know. I
Uh,
know for sure.
so, to get a little more into your book,
Mm,
Psychoanalyzing Horror Cinema, where you mentioned that like a lot of the chapters came from your work on the evolution of horror. But I guess at what point did you start conceptualizing like I have a book here. I want to
mm.
write a book.
Sure. I mean, when I started getting commissioned by Mike Munster to write these Wild About Horror segments, I only ever wrote them with a view to narrate them on his podcast, which I did. I never thought that I would reach a point where I would consider publishing anything formally, but it was really thanks to Mike, for, in a sense, he sort of got me out of my talking only comfort zone, where I sort of wrote myself off as a writer and I said, I just lecture and podcast and that's it. And now suddenly, because of his commissions, I was, consistently coming back to this safe place that he provided for me, where I could return and script these segments. And he would never interfere with my artistic process or my creative process.
Hmm.
And suddenly, just by virtue of time passing by, I thought, oh, hang on a minute, I've got like around 50 segments on my hands right now. And why not publish these? And that's how it sort of came to be. It was totally by accident in a way.
Yeah.
And yeah, and um in terms of, sorry, I don't remember the second part of your question. Would you mind repeating?
Oh yeah, I guess yeah, I guess generally I was just curious about you're talking about like the process of making the book
Mm.
and yeah, I think I was just wondering what inspired you to like want to put this into the world.
Yeah, sure. So let me pick it up from there. And so just because I happen excuse me. Just because I happen to have uh, all of this stuff written down, I thought, let me adapt this into a book. Why not? Of course, I realized that writing for podcast and writing for a book actually are two very different things.
Yeah.
And it does require like a serious process of adaptation and tonal change. And there just has to be like a real transition from one medium to another. And it's a lesson I definitely learned the hard way, for sure. So there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and agonizing that went into it. But to be honest, it gave me the writing bug. Like, I felt like even through the struggle of that hard work, now I've got a book on my hands, and
Yeah.
it is a satisfying thing. There is a sense of accomplishment to it. And so now I'm already sketching out my second book.
Oh, fantastic. So you really have gotten the bug.
Yes, I really have. Except my second book will not be about, because psychoanalyzing horror cinema does cover 50 films across six subgenres.
Yeah.
My second film will not be like that at all. It's going to be all focused on just one film only, And that's not even a horror film. It's actually a science fiction film called Contact,
Huh.
directed by Robert Zemeckis. And I'm using Contact as a blueprint for mapping out a concept by Jacques Lacan called feminine jouissance. And I'm going to write the book as an autofictional case study.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Um, Not traditionally horror, but there's some dark elements in there. So maybe we can find a way to invite you back to talk about that too.
Thank you.
Um, so with your current book, you said you wrote about like upwards of 50 films, right?
Mm.
Um, I was I was lucky enough to be able to attend your online book launch a couple weeks ago, and one of the one of the things that you shared that just like cracked me up in a wonderful way was, of course, earlier we were talking about like how fancy you sound, and you are a very intelligent and thoughtful
Thank
person.
you.
But then you were talking about a couple of your favorite movies to write about, and you mentioned the Predator franchise and the Human Centipede. Am I remembering that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And I was cackling at that. I'm just like, this is amazing. I I I wonder if maybe you could talk a little bit about um, like movies like that. I think are very often, people would just write them off as like popcorn flicks or just like these,
Mm.
silly or frivolous films. What what is it like, or how do you wrap your head around thinking about a movie like that through a more academic or kind
Mm.
of intellectual lens?
Well, thank you for asking this question. It's actually a great one. And it sort of leads me to say that even though I do come from, this, I guess, formal psychoanalytic background and lecture for the Freud Museum, my experience of watching films is very much rooted in having fun.
Hmm.
That's my main aim, and I'm sort of not especially invested in cinema's hierarchies of artistic merit or critical acclaim. I do respect and accept that there are film critics and they're very serious people, but I actually actively distance myself from that type of thing. It's not for me. I don't aspire to be like the guru on the mountaintop. I'm in the trenches with my fellow horror enjoyers. Um, and
Rolling around in the blood and the muck and the gore.
yeah, 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 absolutely, absolutely. That's my happy place. That's where I want to be. And um, Oscar Wilde said, "We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars."
Ah,
And
I love
I
that.
like, I like to be that type of person. I remain in the gutter, like I'm firmly grounded there. I have no illusions about where I am, but I also do preserve a kind of childlike sense of wonder.
Mm.
And for me, that's what my work tries to be, like trying to see the magic here and there and maybe see some patterns, some constellations, look up and say, hey, maybe there's a bigger picture. And 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 yeah, like that there, and that's why I love the Human Centipede and Predator. I find that even through some of this, yeah, maybe more lighthearted popcorn stuff,
Hmm.
be some really extraordinary things going on. And um I'm not really in the business of only, analyzing the films that everyone agrees are masterpieces. I love whimsical, frivolous trash just as much as the great works, you
It's
know.
it's
Probably
all
because
real,
I'm,
right?
oh, sorry.
It's all real. Like they're all uh, something might be art house and something might be a popcorn flick, but it's all an actual part of our society and our identity. And
Yeah.
in many ways, especially we're talking about human psychology, it's often, I think, maybe the quote unquote sillier films, those are the ones that actually tended to raise us, right? We were
Yeah.
we were not watching Italian cinema and old black and white movies when we were like 10 years old with our friends in the basement. We were watching Jason and Chucky and
Yeah.
Arnold Schwarzenegger fight off the Predator. Like that's the stuff that actually
Mhm.
influenced us.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And I think it's also because I am slightly like an unserious person in some ways, like I'm not I don't really want to have an authoritative voice. My book is designed to be more of just promoting psychoanalytic concepts and extending them to my fellow horror lovers so that they can then reach and access their own uh, personal, subjective meanings that are important to them. Ultimately, this book that I wrote is a reflection of my psyche, my unconscious. I would never dare to say this is the final word on anything. I'm sort of quite suspicious of authority like that. I'm more of a proud gutter snipe, and that freedom lets me see symbolic richness in places that maybe some other people might overlook a little bit.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that would probably, I would imagine that would make your book probably more approachable to a wider audience. Whereas if it was, again, there's a time and a place to get really intellectual and really academic, but
Mhm.
recognizing that that can, I think that can also sometimes like scare people off or intimidate people a little bit as well.
Yeah, a little bit it can do, depending on what the context is. It's and that's such a sad thing, that an overly jargonistic and maybe even slightly unreachable discourse might leave out some people who could really, they could really do with what you've got to say, but they're blocked at the first hurdle. They can't comprehend maybe the language, and yeah, I like to have fun, and I'd like to make sure that the party atmosphere of my book is like alive.
Definitely. Um, so can you give us like a little tidbit on, for instance, like the Predator franchise? Like why is that one that speaks to you?
Yeah, I mean, I find it all so kind of absurd, all of these muscle-bound men brandishing weapons, and there's such a certainty of their own power and their own um I guess that they're sort of like going to be undefeated,
Mhm.
and yet they are surveilled systematically by something they can't see, and they are walking into traps that they have no idea about. And uh, it almost verges on slapstick for me.
Yeah.
And I do find that kind of funny, like as a thought experiment, the hubris of humanity. And maybe even like specifically the hubris of a certain programmed toxic feature of the masculine condition, that really anyone can embody, irrespective of their gender. And to see it sort of so cleanly crushed, um, I I do see the humor in that, and I feel like the film leans into that. I don't think the film is trying to escape that or deny that. The way that the film itself is structured, I feel, makes it amenable to looking at it as a slapstick.
Hmm.
I also found this hilarious Wikipedia type page. This is a real thing where someone assiduously sat down to literally count and name every single weapon that we can see in every single film ever made.
Oh my gosh.
It's quite extraordinary. It's a whole database of this type of information, just someone who's super knowledgeable in weapons. And I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And I looked at the pages they had for Predators 1 and 2, because those are the two that I talk about in my book.
Yeah.
And sure enough, this person painstakingly listed every single weapon that appears. And when you sit down to actually read out these weapons, like totally, objectively, you just sit down to like list off these weapons.
Hmm.
It's kind of hilarious because you realize, oh my God, like they had this whole arsenal at their disposal, but they were still, they were still crushed.
It was
And
ineffective.
it's ineffective. And guns and pistols and semi-automatic weapons are so phallic, and there's just such a huge, enormous surplus of them in these movies. And yet still, with all these phallic devices at their disposal, they still couldn't beat this Predator. What is this Predator thing? And I find that all very funny. So I see the funny side, I see the slapstick side, and I take that seriously in a way in the book.
Oh, I love it. I was thinking before we jumped on today, like that everybody's heard that kind of cliche phrase about Freudian psychology of sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, right? But what I love is that you are pushing back on that with a movie like this, and in horror, um, a, sometimes a butcher knife or a bazooka is much more than a butcher knife or a bazooka. It says a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, right, exactly, and maybe these people are protesting a little too much and getting a little too comfortable relying on um yeah, the fact that these weapons render them um indestructible. And and so yeah, I just find all of that kind of stuff amusing really, and yeah, it's just I just giggle really when I see it. But I not to denigrate Predator 1 and 2. I do think they're well-made films,
Mhm.
even though they're sort of zany and bonkers, but there's beauty to be found in that too, I think.
Oh yeah. No, and there's like there's so much to read into it. I mean, I feel like you could have probably written an entire chapter on literally just the handshake between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Carl Weathers when they first meet, right?
Highly memeable image as it turns out. Yeah.
Highly memeable and highly analyzable as well.
Very.
Um, so I guess a bigger picture with your book. Um,
Mhm.
what do you hope readers would take away from your book or get out of the experience of reading it?
Sure. I want readers to become aware that psychoanalytic concepts can really enhance the viewing experience.
Hmm.
Bring about a deeper enjoyment. I want readers to feel seen, that I share maybe in their private obsessions, that they're not alone, and that we're kindred spirits, Um, excuse me. Um, And really, my book is a love letter also to artists. I really respect and admire artists and consider creativity to be a divine and sacred process. I'm in awe of people who summon the human soul through their art. So I would like my book to um, really be an act of gratitude for them, And I mean, I was lucky enough through the horror community to encounter so many wonderful artists,
Mm.
including Susanna Vilches, who painted the cover of my book. She's also known as Suspiria Land on Instagram, and she has a huge following.
Oh, she's
So,
amazing. Our editor, Matt Orozco, has at least one, maybe two of her commissioned pieces hanging in his office. Like he is a
oh
big
wow.
fan of hers.
That's so awesome. I love that. I love that. And I feel like this is such a testament to the beautifully binding quality of our horror community, that we find each other in these organic ways. And so really my book is also meant to be a celebration of that connection. I want to let my readers know that I'm I'm very much on their side. I'm like them, and I like them very much. That I considered them to be friends I never met, and we're connected through this love. Through the love of the macabre.
Really, it's like one of the most amazing things about the horror community. I mean,
Mm,
just to be unprofessional and make it about myself for a second, like horror has generally been a very isolated hobby of mine for most of my life, really until just the last like couple of years. And it's, it is just incredible. It's cliche. Everybody in the horror community says this, but it is cliche because it's true. Horror people are just some of the most fabulous, kind, and just lovely people in the world. And us being able to have a conversation like this, you being able to speak to a larger audience through your book and through your lectures, it is just beautiful, like kind of the friendships and the relationships that they can all build.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That's so nice to hear. And what a beautiful testimony from yourself. And as someone who also cares deeply about mental health,
Mhm.
uh, I do like to compare horror to EMDR, eye movement deprocessing. Sorry, eye movement. Uh, what is it again?
Desensitization and reprocessing.
Thank you. Eye movement
I do that in
desensitization.
my day
Reprocess.
job.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. I love EMDR. It's really the only thing that really helped me, to be honest with you. I I I'm such a huge proponent of it, and I absolutely I think you're doing the Lord's work. Um
You know.
Um, but I have compared horror to EMDR. It's a kind of unbeatable processing machine in a sense, like showing us scary content, providing a safe space for engaging with fearful material, but never posing a direct threat or danger to us as viewers. And horror fans are sort of regularly integrating their shadow side. So maybe we are just a little less likely than the average person to perhaps succumb to repression related mental health issues.
Mhm.
Um, I'd like to think that, I feel like so many of the horror fans I've met are some of the most mentally resilient people I've ever met, you know? Um, so horror is my clinic. It keeps me brave.
Oh, that's awesome. That was going to be one of my final questions to you. I
Mm,
think you basically answered it, but we're both totally biased. But
mm.
is horror good for your mental health? I think that's a resounding yes, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, yes. Strongly recommend it, and you'll be better off for becoming a horror fan.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like the you said something about like kind of being able to control the narrative, and I think that's often how I've described horror to people who don't get it or maybe wonder, like, what are you talking about? How could it be helpful? But yeah, it's this idea of being able to, horror doesn't shy away from the really scary, fucked up
Mm.
stuff in the world, and
Yeah,
it allows us to view it in a way that's more controlled, where we can pause it and step away if we need to. We can um, experience it with friends and loved ones and people who are safe. And it's a really healthy way to expose yourself to some of these darker themes, I believe.
I agree. Yeah, very well put.
Yeah. I'll have to, speaking of EMDR, off
Mm.
camera, I will have to send this to you. At one point in EMDR, for anyone who does not know, there's a common tool called the nurturing figure that people sometimes use, where you envision, a supportive person, a caring person, a nurturing figure. And I actually, uh, put together a little twist on it that uses like the final girl archetype. So visualizing a final girl and kind of bringing her into your EMDR or
Oh,
into your personal therapeutic journey.
love that. Love that. That's so brilliant.
Yeah, it's fun stuff, but that's why, again, why we have to create these spaces for us to talk about these things, because it would be unprofessional of me to force all my clients to watch slasher movies just so we can talk about Final Girls in therapy.
Well, you've carved out the perfect space, and I'm personally, excited to hear more from what you're going to be contributing, because I think this is such important work to really to kind of bridge that gap between the discussion on horror and mental health, and find out and discover just how much of a useful resource it really is for
Mhm.
facing fears and integrating the shadow side of the self. Yeah, I think it's wonderful. I'm so glad you're doing it.
Oh, and I'm glad you're doing it. I imagine I'll be recommending your book to many people in the future.
Thank
Um,
you.
so just as we wrap up, for people listening who I'm sure are fascinated to learn more and to read more, how can people find your book?
Sure, thank you. So basically, my book is available anywhere that books are sold. It is on Amazon, and um, I'm in the UK, so it's sold at Waterstones and the Karnak Bookshop, which is a special psychoanalytic bookstore on Finchley Road in North London. But pretty much you can get it online anywhere. I seem to be stocked virtually everywhere. You can also purchase it directly from the Routledge website. And if you Google my name and Routledge, it'll take you straight there. And they often have discounts, so there could be a possibility of getting it at a lower price. But yeah, if I'm very, it's kind of surreal, the idea that now I've got my thoughts out there in physical form.
Well,
It took me a while to adjust to that notion. It was a bit of an ontological shift, which was a little bit horror adjacent, I have to add, because, before I've been sort of like I guess like being a lecturer and a podcaster, you can kind of get away with saying some stuff and then you're off. You're in the ether. No one can really pin you down and say, "Hey, you said this, and I have it in my hand." Even though, of course, these things live online and they have permanence online. It's just very different ontologically to have a book in your hand and my thoughts are there and people can touch my thoughts. Like that's, to me, that's kind of like a body horror, or like, I don't know.
no, absolutely. Oh, I can
It's
see
kind
that.
of scary. But
There's a
I'm
movie
trying to,
there.
yeah, yeah, it is. It's very Cronenbergian. Someone touched my thoughts. Um, but I'm trying to kind of like go with that and not let it, not let it make me doubtful or scared,
Mhm.
and embrace it. It's just a different format. It's a different medium. And I know that a lot of horror lovers out there are great readers. They're avid readers. And I genuinely and sincerely hope that the sophistication that they have and the way that they are very discerning in their cultural tastes, that by some miracle, my book will also be appreciated by them, because I have so much respect for horror fans and I love them very much.
Mhm. Well, if there's any justice in the universe, that will all that you're putting out there will come true, and we of
Thank you.
course will do our part at Macabre Daily to put the good word out about you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And Mary, just so that's how people can find your book, but how can people find you personally?
Mm. I am at PsychStar on all social media platforms. That's PSYCSTAR. And I post on Instagram and all the other social media platforms under that handle. I also have a Patreon and Substack where I post paywall content, ranging from essays to podcasts, loads of interviews with filmmakers, psychoanalysts, loads of personal stories, and like uh, just concept focused episodes. A lot of my video recorded lectures are on Patreon, so you can easily find all that material online.
Fantastic. Yeah. And when we write this up and publish the interview, we will, of course, include links to all that stuff so people can follow it and find you and buy your book. Uh,
Thank you.
So yeah, so Mary, I could talk to you all day, especially about mental health and horror, but I am going to attempt to be respectful of your time. And yeah, I just can't thank you enough for coming over to Macabre Daily to talk to us about your book, Psychoanalyzing Horror Cinema.
Brian, thank you so much. I really appreciate receiving this wonderful platform. It's such an honor to be here to talk with you. I have so much gratitude. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, yeah. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And yeah, we'll talk to you all soon. In the meanwhile, stay scary.